Hello YouTube, today I'll be teaching you the basics of watercolor by walking you through a starry night scene. I find these are the best way to practice for beginning watercolor technique skills. Within this tutorial, you will learn the main techniques of wet on wet on dry, and dry on dry, along with how to use your brushes and tools to their fullest. So without further ado, let's begin. So as always, I like to begin with a sketch. Notice I stay very loose and fast, and I hold my pencil near the rear to keep pressure off the page, giving me nice light lines perfect for painting over, but won't be seen in the final work. Now I'll come back and darken the lines so you may have a better view of my process. This sketching step can always be avoided altogether in watercolor if you prefer to work straight away with paint. I do this because I like to have a plan, and sketching was my first love. Remember, not to follow your sketch too closely. It's best to see where the paint takes you sometimes, so in a sense, it's best to paint outside the lines. With the sketch out of the way, let's talk about some of the tools you'll need. You'll need watercolor paper, tape, either painter's tape or masking tape, a palette for mixing your paints, an assortment of brushes, paper towels, one crumbled and one balled, 2 cups for clean and dirty water, and an assortment of watercolor paints. The first step to creating a starry night sky scene is to load up a large flat brush with clean water, then soak the page until it glistens. Now, while we let the paper really absorb that layer of water that we just put down, we'll mix our colors together. With watercolor, you can always add layers of darker colors, so it's best to start light and work up. However, adding light over dark is almost impossible and a lot of work. So what I like to do is to start the mix of my first layer colors with a sizable puddle of water. The more water in the mix, the less dynamic the color will be. The more paint, the more the color will show through. For the first mix, I'm going to take our crimson and ocean blue to mix a dark violet. This will be the underlayer of our sky. This being said, feel free to experiment with different colors. These night sky exercises are not meant to be realistic skies. I also mix an ocean blue on its own to blend with the violet, as you'll see later. Before we add the paint, let's add another layer of water, so we have as much water to work with, allowing for the best blending of color. With a larger round brush, load it up with clean water, and then generously fill it with paint by rolling the brush through the color, allowing for every bristle to gather color. With the brush angled pointed at the page, jab lightly at the page. Allow the paint to spread freely wherever the water takes it. This technique is called wet on wet because both the page and the paintbrush are very wet. As you'll see, I very loosely follow my original sketch and allow the color puddle to guide and inspire me, which is what I would encourage to you. With your balled up paper towel, lightly touch the paper to absorb some of the color, giving the colored area a cloudy effect. Be sure to rotate and turn the paper towel so that the different wrinkles of the towel create more variety in the color. We'll grab our other color now and place it in our unfilled areas, allowing it to blend naturally with our previous color. Again, using our paper towel to pat out the color once we're pleased with the blend. I'm going to re-wet the bottom of the page and use our paper towel to pull more color up, so that the color is stronger at the top of the piece and lightens as we look down. We can enhance this effect by wetting our flat brush and drying it on the paper towel so that it is damp but not dry, and drag the color down the page to the horizon line. After giving the paper time to dry for about 15 minutes, we can begin the next layer. As 15 minutes won't leave the paper completely dry, but will give us just enough that our color won't spread and blend on their own. I've mixed a new blue with Persian blue for this next layer, which I use to create more depth. I also use our violet wash again as well. Notice the edges do not blend and are a little sharp. We'll correct this with our trusty paper towel ball. That's better. wanted to give the sky a bit of depth, so I wet it again and add another wet on wet wash to it. I use Payne's Gray to add some darkness to the blue mixes. This is where I start really letting the paint puddles guide me. I use a magenta and a Persian blue to mix a vibrant purple to really give this sky some life. With a slightly more damp page, I let the purple mix with the dark blue. I also give the horizon a purple tint by painting and pulling color out along the lower half of the page. It was at this point I decided to heighten some green spots that had naturally blended from our first and second layers. So I mixed a bright green and laid them down to bring more interest to the piece. A little blotching out with a paper towel makes them look more natural alongside the blue and the purple. The piece dry for about 8 hours, but if you don't have the time, 2 hours of dry time will be plenty of time for a small project like this. I mix a dark wash with Persian blue and Payne's Gray. We can then start to use clean water to re-wet areas that we want to paint. Because the paint will only flow in wet areas, we can use dark blue to frame the rest of the sky, creating more direction in our piece. Notice how I don't need to be precise with my brush placement. I just place it in the already created puddle and it fills the area I want for me, almost like the paint bucket tool in an art program. With the puddle still wet, I directly add a Payne's Gray wash to it to let it blend on the paper together rather than pre-mixing in my palette. This makes the blue puddle the right shade for me. Now we're ready to begin our mountain range. We'll begin by using a medium round brush to block in some mountains with Payne's Gray. Go back and add another layer of color to the mountain tops. With a folded edge of a paper towel, I collect some of the color at the base of the mountains, but leave the top with a darkened color, giving a fog effect that the mountain in the distance will have. While we let the mountains dry, I apply paint with no water mix except with the little water on the brush directly to the dry page. This is called dry on dry and is best for the most vibrant color the paint can give you. I use this technique very conservatively because I don't want to overpower the rest of the piece. Just add more interest to it with a bright green and magenta. I wet a paper towel directly and dab out just a little color because the paint is just a bit too strong for my taste. Now, that really added some depth to the sky. We're now ready to add the second mountain range. Notice I let it slope below and above the first randomly, just because I really want to solidify the depth we created. We want the mountain range in front to be darker overall compared to the first to help with this. Finally ready to bring this piece all together with the most important part, the stars. I mix a white wash of gouache paint. If you have a white paint in your watercolor set, it's actually gouache paint, so don't feel any need to go out and buy a set of gouache paints. Now, load up a brush liberally and then tap it against another brush, causing a spatter effect. If you're worried about the control of the spatter, you're welcome to put down a piece of scrap paper to protect the mountains from any unwanted stars. But if any stars get in there, a paper towel will clean them up just fine. I test how dry the mountains are with the back side of my finger. Anytime you need to see how dry something is, it's best to use the back side of your fingers so you don't smudge or get your natural oils in the wash. With the mountains fully dry, we can move on to painting in some trees. I used 3 different techniques for the pine trees, so you're welcome to pick any of them or even test and create your own. Trees can be done in so many different ways, and the only right way is the one that you think works the best for you. The first 2 trees I paint by loading up a flat brush with a low water paint and scrubbing it on the paper towel to leave only residual paint. This lets us paint in a way that only the top texture of the watercolor paper collects paint. Next 2 trees I did the same, except I didn't scrub out any paint in the paper towel, so more paint was on the brush, making the pieces more thick and noticeable. The last few trees, I did a mix of these 2 techniques to make the trees that are more in the middle of the 2. I think I'll do a tree tutorial soon to show all the different ways trees can be made. They really are so diverse to create in watercolor. Finally, I went back with a white ink marker to make some of the stars here and there step out from the rest. This step is optional and is really not all that important. The step is to slowly peel off the tape and see how it all looks. I had a lot of fun with this one, and I know you will too. Galaxies and starry night pieces just are the best thing for a beginner to learn on, or an experienced watercolorist to practice their skills on. If you enjoyed my work, please give me a like and subscribe for more videos in the future, and you can see more of my work on my Instagram page. Thank you for watching, and happy painting!